So hello and welcome to the IPPS-A Sustainment webinar series. Today's webinar is on job data corrections within IPPS-A. My name is Captain Marisha McLean and I am your primary speaker for today's webinar. Before we begin, I have a few items to cover about this presentation and the DCS webinar platform. First, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on both the IPPS-A YouTube channel and IPPS-A S1Net training page. Second, if your DCS connection drops during the webinar, please close your browser and use the provided DCS link to reconnect. Next, your microphones and phone lines are on mute. You must press 0 to speak, so please expect a 1 to 2 second lag when speaking. If you would like to download parts of this presentation during the webinar, please use the download icon that's located below your presentation window. And lastly, please post your questions to the public chat panel so that we can answer them throughout the session. In addition to live responses, all questions and their corresponding answers will be posted with this video to the IPPS-A YouTube channel and to the IPPS-A S1Net training page. Your questions and feedback matter, so please share. So without further ado, begin. All right, so this is our agenda for today. We will begin by highlighting some system logic surrounding the job data module. Then we will cover ways that IPPS-A informs users that a correction is needed, followed by some demonstrations where we will identify a correction and make the necessary changes. So the key takeaway here is that the job data module displays the history of a soldier's Army career. The image to the left is showing the data that in most cases auto-populates within job data. Please note that job data is organized by home and host records. Host records are generated when a host or temporary assignment is created and acts. A soldier's true history is maintained on the home or zero record. So when a job data correction is required, users should be working within the home record. So this is the explanation of the effective date, row, and sequence number logic within job data. In short, a soldier's job data history is organized by row effective date and sequence number. The current view, or top of stack, will always be row 1. It's the most recent effective data row in a soldier's history. Now this is important because when the data from this row does not match something that is on a previous row, a correction is often required. We see this pretty frequently when dealing with promotion data. I would also like to highlight the blue text that lists common types of rows that you will see in job data. As a note, when you see service dates, also think of contract extensions because that's a pretty common row that users are populating within job data. So this is an actual example of effective date and row logic. Because these two rows were processed with the same effective date of December 4th, 2019, the sequence number increased to make the rows both unique and to keep them in order. So this allows users to process multiple transactions on the same day while ensuring that downstream systems are updated in the right order. We will see this come into play during our demonstration today. To avoid making erroneous manual changes to job data, you should always validate that there is no better means of making that correction. So I point you to the blue text that's to the left. So 1, check for orders. If the change is something that could be inputted automatically through, let's say, the use of a PAR or a board roster, for example, make sure that PAR was approved and the orders was generated before making an update to job data. Also notice that ACT updates job data, but job data does not update ACT. So in cases where you feel that an assignment is missing, or let's say an assignment's begin or end dates are incorrect, use the ACT module to make those changes. And don't forget, host assignments are created in numerical order based on when they were created in ACT. So host assignments are not going to be visible on the home or zero record, which is where job corrections are occurring. And lastly, you want to determine the type of update that needs to happen. Are you trying to correct existing history? Are you trying to insert new data or new row? Do you feel that a row should be deleted? To avoid making an erroneous change, I always encourage users to check with their HR leaders and refer to IPPS-A resources like the job aids that are located on S1Net and the Army National Guard user manual to help determine the best method for making your updates. So prior to going forward, I want to pause for any questions. And again, you can press 0 to speak, or you can post any questions or comments to the chat panel. All right, nothing heard. So we will now go into ways that IPPS-A notifies users that a correction is needed. So the promotion info update report, this is a data quality report that helps users identify promotion mismatches within job data. So the quick path, it's a very easy path, is listed right here on the screen, Navigator, then you're going to click IPPS-A data quality, and then you're going to click promotion info report, which takes you directly to the report page. Depending on whether you have used this report in the past, you will use a run ID to locate and create the report. And like other HCM reports, you'll have several UIC search options. And once you make your selection, you're going to press the Run button, and then you're going to go through the Process Monitor to actually view the report results. So here's an example of the results that you will see. Please note that a lack of results may mean that there's no mismatches for the UIC that you selected to search on. So as a quick overview, this report tells you who approved the transaction. So you see this first line shows IPPS-A, which means it was generated through an automated process. So for example, it may have come out of a board. I edited out the name of the leader who approved the second transaction, and that could have been made through a PAR or maybe direct manual entry into job data. What this report also shows is the soldier information that the promotion was processed for, as well as the new rank and grade data. Now, I highlighted the current rank and grade data here, and this is the data that is reflected on the soldier's current view or their row 1. So this is the mismatch that caused this soldier to appear on this report, signaling that a correction is required. So correction alert is another way that IPPS-A informs users that a correction is needed. In the same way that promotion info update report operates, IPPS-A is looking for data mismatches within the soldier record. So the job data correction prompts go to HR Plus users that have the row level security to action on the soldier's record. Now notice that the alerts are pretty standard in their format. They show the soldier's info ID and name. They also show the effective date of the row that triggered the correction and the assignment ID that the soldier is in for that row. Now, although these alerts are helpful, they don't tell you what needs to be corrected, which means you're going to have to do some digging within job data and do some research. So take note of the blue text that's listed here. On the Work Location tab, the first page that defaults when you enter a soldier's job data record, I want you to check out the date created date. That is an easy way to determine whether that row was inserted or not. I personally find it easier to determine what fields require correction when, one, I know that the row was inserted, and then two, when I check out the row's action reason. So for example, if a row was inserted and it was a promotion row, then most likely the salary plan data is what needs to be pushed forward to more recent effective dated rows to meet that correction requirement. And then always take the time to look at other row history. It's not uncommon for a soldier to have multiple corrections. So if you don't check for it, you won't find it. So before we jump into the demonstration, I just want to ask again if there's any questions. Again, you can press 0 to speak. Otherwise, feel free to post your comments to the chat panel. And then also just for expectation management, to make it easier to follow, I'm using screenshots to explain the topics that are listed on the screen. So please feel free to ask questions during this demonstration. Don't hesitate to share methods that you currently follow to make job data corrections in your unit. This is an open forum, so all feedback and messages and comments are welcome. Okay, so first question, who is responsible to correct a mismatch? So it's gonna it's gonna be due to your SOP, but HR Pro Plus users, because that role maintains the correct history, that subcat maintains correct history mode, they're gonna have the ability to make the correction. So you might have to determine who within your pool of HR Pro Plus users you actually want to make changes to, and that's a struggle because if you have a lot of your row set class or your row security level is high, let's say at a brigade level, you're going to get notifications for everybody within your brigade, but let's say you might only want that S10IC to make those changes. You'll have to just use that as a way to track whether or not the people that you've identified to make the changes are actually changing them, because you will continue to get notifications if those changes are not made. That's a really good question. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into the demonstration. So again, I'm going to start with a scenario where pushing information forward is the required correction. So to focus your attention, the action blocks that are listed on the screen, they briefly describe what a user is looking for or what they need to do. The gold circles that you'll see in the following slide symbolize useful information, and the red boxes that you will see later symbolize where a manual correction is required. Now again, HR Pro Plus users with the correct history mode as part of their role bundle will be the ones that make these type of corrections. So always ensure that the correct history block is checked before entering the soldier's record. There is a button for correct history if you forget to check it that exists throughout. It's like just a field, a row of buttons that are down there. And if you forget to check it before you enter in, you can click the correct history mode, and if you have that role, it'll allow you to make corrections. And yes, if you don't make a correction, or let's say you only make a partial correction and IPPS-A has identified that there's more to be done on that record, you'll keep getting alerts. And so that's one reason why it's important to look throughout the history and see if there's anything else that doesn't match. And we'll kind of talk about some of those fields that tend to have mismatches if you're not looking at them pretty frequently. So in this scenario, I use the promotion info update report to determine that a correction was needed. And so to the left here are the rank and grade details that was listed on the report. So a promotion row was inserted, with rank and grade dates of 4/10/2019, but the top of stack or the current rank is showing a January 2019 date. So a correction is required. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, let me go back. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter the soldier's record. So I'm on the first row, row 1 for this soldier. And I want you to take note, this is where that date created date exists. So it exists for every row that's in somebody's history. And so it's for here, we're just going to take a mental note of the date, and we're going to see if this row was actually inserted into the record or not. Sometimes corrections are inserted. Sometimes it was just wrong from the beginning, and we need to make a correction forward. And then I also want to just make note that you want to always look at the effective date to make sure you're on the right row. So we're looking for a row with an effective date of 4/10. So that just tells me, that this is not the row that triggered the correction. So I used my arrows and found the row that I was looking for. It's row 3 of 9. I'm still on the work location tab right now, and I see that the date created was actually prior to the most recent effective data row. So this signals that the row was not inserted. So this is just data that needs to be corrected. So I'm also taking note of the action reason that's listed here. And so I'm going to go to the salary plan tab since this row was a promotion row as expected. So checking out the promotion data that's listed on this row, I see that the data listed here matches what was on that report. I expected to see E4. I expected to see this date as the rank entry date. Same for the grade entry date. So no problems here. Again, this is row 3. As a means of just always verifying the other history that's available, I like to go back at least one row just to see what was before that row that triggered the change, because sometimes people make adjustments, especially when promotions or grade and rank data is the issue. They make corrections to multiple rows, even ones they're not supposed to touch. So I always like to go back one row just to check. And in this case, nothing appears to be out of order, so I'm going to move forward. So I use my arrows to go to row 2. So this is the one row that's more recent than the row that triggered the change. And immediately I see that the rank entry date and grade entry dates don't match the promotion row. So these two things need to change. So that's one correction. But one thing to note too is that we know that from the report that the current rank is actually a January date. So this is an example of where that report is not all encompassing of all the corrections that might need to be made. So if I didn't check row 2, I would have missed the fact that the rank entry and grade entry date is also incorrect here. So as a HR Pro Plus, I'm going to make the changes now. And so now I go to row 1, the row that told me that there was a mismatch in the first place. And I see exactly what the report said. The current rank was showing as a January date, and so now I need to make those 2 changes. And once I make that change to row 1, and I also made the changes to row 2, I'm going to click the Save button, and the corrections required for this record are complete. Now, before I move forward, I'm going to pause for any questions about what I just covered just now. And again, this was a simple one. And in a lot of cases, I think users are a little intimidated by job data because they don't want to make a mistake. But it's really just kind of detailed work. You have to look through each tab. There's really no easier or faster way to do it. I mean, this promotion info report, update report does kind of help you zone in for promotions. But there can be things wrong with the work location tab, the job information tab. You just want to look at the field values, and if there wasn't a change So the action reason of that row doesn't change why, like the field should have been something different, then you'll need to bring those corrections forward. All right, so I'm going to take a moment to look at the tap panel. All right, so in this case, this is a great point. So this person's row 1 was a system conversion row. So that means all the promotion, all the rows above it or before it don't have IPPS-A generated orders. So that promotion row came over during conversion. I don't know how the dates were adjusted. At some point they were. So the changes that I made are not going to automatically send to DJMS. So you're going to have to contact the USPFO, send the promotion orders so that they can manually update DJMS to ensure that the soldier's pay is correct. So the report that I mentioned is, I'm going to go back to that slide that has the path on it. A little too far. Okay, so this is the path to the report. So it's really just 2 clicks. You click your navigator, and then you're going to have this field here, data quality. And depending on your the subcat that you have, you might only see this option or you might see 2 options. But once you click this report, you'll be prompted to insert run ID, and then you could fill in the search criteria. And the data that's being done, the corrections that were done on this particular scenario is all pre-conversion row data. So I didn't need to generate any special pars in order to do it. At most, the only thing I would have had to do was look at the soldier's I-perms, make sure that that promotion date was actually correct to specialists, and use that as a source of reference as I made the update. So the incorrect row in this case, I didn't have to delete it because the incorrect rows was just rows 2 and 1 that was already existing. The only thing I had to do was update the field data. I will have to get back with you. I do not believe that you need to be a plus to view that report. But if you don't see it, I'm going to make sure that I include that into the webinar notes, what role is actually required to review the report. I was tracking that an HR Pro or HR Pro Plus should be able to see this. So if you have both of those roles and that report is not available to you, I'll reach back to you personally and let you know what role you need to get, and then I'll publicize it to the group when I send out the notes. So to the best of our knowledge, the reports in IPPS-A data quality are working correctly. If you find that they are not through use, please let us know. You can do that through a means of contacting me or the IPPS-A mailbox directly, or you can submit a CRM ticket, which is always a great idea because then we could track it, we can identify it as a trend, and then we can use that to prioritize the enhancement or whatever the data fix is to fix that report if it's not generating correctly. But to the best of my knowledge, that report is working well. All right, so for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So here's an example of row insertion. So here we are looking at an alert that HR Pro Plus person received. So again, it's going to start notifying me that a job data correction is required. It's giving me the soldier's employee ID and name, as well as the row that triggered the change. So that's what I'm going to be looking for first. So in this particular screenshot, I did not show me starting off at work location, but typically I would start at the work location tab, check out the date created date. But here I'm going straight to the salary plan tab because in most cases it's a promotion it's promotion data that's a little off. So I went in this particular scenario to the salary plan tab. I used my arrows and I searched for the row that had the effective date that matched my notification. So in this particular example, the action reason for this row is a PCA intra-command move. So that's a little unique because that tells me that the row is saying that a change was made in ACT and then some data was inserted and changed, and so now I need to go in and validate it. So first thing I want to do is actually make sure that ACT is updated correctly and that this was not an inserted row that was done manually instead of through the ACT module. So I go to ACT, I search for the soldier, and I click on the soldier's current assignment or current home assignment details. And so here is just a snapshot of the first couple blocks for the assignment. And I can confirm that based on the begin date and the action reason that was listed here, this assignment was inserted from the ACT module into job data, so no issues here. And so now I go back to job data. And like I did previously, I'm going to go back a row just to kind of see what kind of data is listed. So I go back a row from row 3, now I'm on row 4. And I'm just looking again at the salary plan data tab because in most cases something's wrong with the promotion data. But here I don't find anything that looks out of place. I see this as a specialist as of July 2015. And so, okay, I'm going to go forward to look at the other rows. So now I'm going to row 2. So first thing I noticed is that row 2 has the same effective date as row 3. So the sequence number is 1. So that tells me that this transaction was processed after the intra-command move. That is important because as you see here, this second transaction is a lateral appointment to corporal. So the rank entry date is correct. It matches the effective date of the lateral promotion. Look here at this grade entry date. That was changed to match the effective date of the lateral promotion. So that is incorrect. For lateral appointments, the grade entry date remains the same date that the soldier enters the grade. So in this case, it would be that July 2015 date that we saw on row 4. So this requires a correction. So now for the sake of moving forward, I'm going to go to row 1. I'm also checking out the salary plan tab since I've seen that that was an issue. I see the effective date, acknowledge that. I see the corporal data appears to be correct, but here again, the grade entry date was also updated incorrectly. So that also needs to be changed back to the July 2015 date that it was on row 4. So to make sure that I caught all the errors, I'm going back to the row that was inserted from ACT. That's row 3. Again, take note of the sequence number. This is 0. So this happened before the lateral appointment took place. But this particular HR user updated the soldier's rank and grade data to corporal, which is incorrect. So all of this data has to be changed back to the row 4 data, which listed the specialist rank and grade data. So I'm going to pause, take a look at the chat panel real quick. So if a 10 doesn't fire and you know that it didn't fire because, let's say, the promotion, so if you get notified that a 10 is not going to fire and you're making a correction in job data, that means that the order does not exist within IPPS-A that matches the correction that you just made. So if it's a pre-conversion row, that's going to happen because those orders don't exist in IPPS-A. But if it's a post-conversion row and you're trying to make a change to promotion data, but the order does not exist in IPPS-A, then that means that you need to do a PAR to actually produce the order before you make that change. So it really depends on whether it's pre-conversion or post-conversion row post-conversion rows, there needs to be an order within IPPS-A that states that those dates are correct. Once that order is generated and then the row is generated, so first the order, then the job data update, the 10 will fire. So the assignment ID number is automatically created within the ACTS module. When you create an assignment, it just gives it an assigned number, and that number just stays with that particular soldier's assignment for tracking purposes. Yeah, or you can do an amendment to the order. So yeah, so you can do it. So the PAR, you can do a PAR to amend something that's already existing, and that would be the best way. But just note that an amendment PAR will not update job data. So once you approve that PAR to amend something, you still got to go into job data and make the manual correction. But the key is having the order exist within IPPS-A to get the 10 to fire. All right, so we had some pretty good discussion here. I really appreciate it. So now we're going to just run through just a handful of other correction examples that we've received inquiries about here at the program. So this is one that we hear quite often, you know, erroneous contract extension row. So in this particular case, I'm talking about the actual job data was entered into, in the actual ETS date that was entered into job data for the contract extension was incorrect. So there's really two ways you can do this, and I'm going to upfront let you know that it's going to be up to your state leadership about how they want this to go. And if you are the state leadership, I'll briefly give you a little bit of the pros and cons of each. But method one is essentially creating a new contract extension row. So you could use the same effective date and update the sequence number to 1 or whatever, you know, sequential number it is based on the transactions that took place that day. Again, you're not pressing save until all the ETS data is updated on the work location tab and on the job labor tab. And then you're going to update if you do that, and let's say you have a more recent effective data row, push that ETS date forward, press save, and then complete the auto generation of contract module as normal with all the correct data. So the plus of method one is you're not deleting anything, which is one of the benefits of job data with it being effective dated. It can maintain all types of history, even erroneous history. And so if it's updated, if you add a row on top, it's going to generate a new contract. And so that's one of the cons, if I would have one, is that when you look at compare soldiers' records to their IPPS-A, you know, contract extension rows, if you created an erroneous row and it corrected by creating a new row, it's going to appear like the soldier has more contract extensions than they actually do. But that can be easily, you know, determined through an audit process. But that's method one. Method two would be to delete the erroneous contract row, and then that will also delete the associated contract, and then you'll just start the process from zero. Create a new row, create a new contract, you know, follow the steps of updating the ETS date, then press save. The plus of that is that the number of contracts would generally match what's in the soldier's record. The downfall is that you're actually deleting data out of job data. You're deleting record information out of job data, which, depending on who you talk to, that may not be the best method. So that's why I presented both for your state leadership to determine what makes the most sense for your unit population. Oh, well, let me go back to see a couple questions. So the trigger that generates the auto generation of contract field is the save button. So that's why it's important not to press save. So when you select that action reason code after creating the row, you have to update all the ETS data first before you press save. If you update work location tab, the projected end date field and then press save, the contract is going to generate. But guess what? You didn't have a chance to update the job labor tab, which is the field that's going to feed the downstream system with the new ETS date. So the save button will trigger the contract to get generated. But so that's why it's important for you to include all the ETS data before pressing save. So if you find that the contract is not generating after pressing save, just submit a CRM ticket. That way we can check it out at the program. It should work that way. We recently updated business logic for it to work. So if you're finding that it's not, please let us know through a CRM so we can track it and find out if it's a trend. So here's another example of a correction. So this is an erroneous demotion that occurred pre-conversion, that is within the pre-conversion rows. So that just means up front the demotion orders are not in IPPS-A, which means you can't use IPPS-A to create a revocation of demotion orders. So first thing you're going to have to do is manually create those orders to revoke that reduction. So we have several SMEs that have opened themselves up for questions about this process. First Sergeant Bilbrey from the VA Army National Guard actually did a great webinar last Thursday on semi-centralized and centralized promotions. He is available for any questions about this process, especially when it comes to revoking orders or creating manual orders due to it not being able to be an option for creation within IPPS-A. So if you have any questions, definitely email me and I can point you in the direction of him. But the first thing you want to do is create those orders, because you shouldn't do anything without a set of orders or key supporting documents. Next, you're going to insert a row. So the row type is important. You're inserting a promotion row that has a reason of erroneous demotion or reduction. And like I said, we don't want to delete history. And although this is a conversion row, and you technically could delete it without it having any adverse impact within IPPS-A because no order exists, it's best to keep that history there and then just create another row to go on top of it that has the same effective date as the erroneous reduction row. Once you make that change, you're going to push that forward to top the stack. And again, because orders do not exist within IPPS-A, you're going to have to submit those manually created orders to your USPFO so that they can manually update their pay in DJMS. All right, so we're almost done. I appreciate everybody hanging in there with me. Correct assignment data. So this is an example where, let's say, a backdated assignment was created in ACT, and so ACT generated and automatically inserted a row into the soldier's home record. So this is one of those cases where, like I said, you want to go check to see if the row is inserted. Always want to, if it's an inserted row and it's a row dealing with assignments, you always want to go back and check ACT just to make sure it was properly completed within ACT. Go back into job data and then start looking for fields that are mismatched. So rows that tend to be, fields that tend to be incorrect when you're dealing with an inserted assignment row are going to be located on your work location and your job information tab. So here's just some little screenshots of the type of fields that are editable for work location tab and the job information tab. We see rows inserted, let's say if there was a promotion that's supposed to happen, so usually it's like a pause, inter-command move, something like that. When that takes place, most likely the position number changed. So that's a field that you're most likely going to have to push that new data forward to more recent effective data rows. The department or the UIC that they were a part of, so it's going to show here as a department number and the date that they actually arrived to that department. That most likely will be a little different. And then job code. So if this person, let's say, was getting reassigned due to taking a new taking a promotion, most likely their job code is going to change. And so because of that change, the entry date into that job code will also change. So those are just some fields that you can expect to change when the insert role is dealing with an assignment. All right, and lastly, row deletion. So we already kind of talked about some of this. The system is built to maintain all soldier history. So deletions is not always the first method that I would I would encourage users to use. If you can insert a row instead that cancels out the erroneous row, that is most likely the best option. It's usually the least harmful. But there are some circumstances where deleting a row makes sense. And so here are some places. So if you're going to delete a row, it should be probably in the pre-conversion row area. Only reason being there's no IPPS-A orders, so most likely it's not going to cause too many downstream effects. Contract extensions, again, that's a method. Up to your state to determine whether or not you use that method. And then also in the post-conversion side of the house, let's say if someone inserted a row into job data that should have been created in ACT but wasn't, again, ACT updates job data does not update ACT. So you will want to delete manually updated assignment rows from job data, correct them in ACT, or create them in ACT, and let it automatically insert. And so this is a summary of what we covered today. We covered a lot of information, so I appreciate all of your time. As normal, I like to take a moment to let you know how to locate some of our resources. So this is the link to our S1Net page. From that page, you can look at our job aids by clicking on the guides folder. And then also you can review the read-ahead slides for like this webinar and the one that's scheduled tomorrow on the COVID assignment within the webinar series folder and training folder, as well as all the previous webinar data that we've done. We've tried our best to keep it updated to show not only the informational side, but some key highlights from demonstrations. And so it's definitely worth checking out. And then I'll just like to let all those who's still on the line take a moment to respond to this survey in the chat panel. These responses are very helpful, especially number 4, because it helps us to determine what you guys need to know, what you want to know, and how to prioritize our future webinar sessions and training materials. So I'm going to click off of this briefly, do my final closing, and then go right back to that. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. We will keep the conference open for an additional 10 minutes so that further questions and comments can be added to the chat panel. But please visit our IPPS-A social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel for webinar postings, functional videos, and news from the IPPS-A team. Again, thanks again for joining.